So, welcome to my lovely talk on what should have apparently now been called PowerShell Power Smells. Sadly, I didn't think of that. Instead, you've got, don't do this, or don't do that, do this instead. So I'm Chris Gardner. I'm a Azure DevOps consultant, which means I deal with Azure DevOps and Azure DevOps. I do a lot of PowerShell stuff, and if it's difficult or interesting, it usually seems to come my way. And apparently I'm a PowerShell MVP or CDM MVP or whatever they call them these days. So I'm going to look at, as you can imagine, things you shouldn't be doing in PowerShell and what you should be doing instead. So there's three really, really important things you have to think about whenever you're writing any sort of PowerShell. That's kind of the key things I want to discuss here. The important part I have to point out, though, is I really don't care what you do in the shell. Use your aliases, do whatever you want, doesn't matter. If it's in a script, these things matter. If you press save on a file, these things matter. You know, if you mess around the ISA or VS Code, pretending it's a shell, I don't care, do whatever. The most important thing that you could possibly do is write readable code. Like, it's super important. If you write a bunch of code and people can't read it, or you can't read it in tomorrow, 6 months' time, whenever, then how useful is it? You end up writing like regex and Perl and stuff, which is a write once language. No one's ever going to read it. No one knows what the hell it says. You know, you can't. And then the problem is, if it's not readable, it's not maintainable. Now I can't fix my scripts when I find problems with them, or I can't fix someone else's scripts if I find problems with them. So we have to be able to maintain these things going forward. You know, if we can't maintain them, then I have to rewrite the same script to do the same job, but slightly differently. And the more interesting one, to some degree, is performant enough. The enough is quite important here, and very vague, because we have to be with these sorts of things. So if you have a script that runs once a month, if it takes 10 hours, who cares? Whatever. If it's running every night, it better not be taking 10 hours. It should be taking an hour, less, whatever. A reasonable amount of time, given how often you run the script. If you're running it every 5 minutes at the console, I hope it's not taking 6 minutes, or 4 minutes 59. So, building on this, quite an important general point as well. Source control. How many people are using source control? Excellent. How many people are actually using real source control? Like this, like folders aren't source control. Network shares, no, not source control. Shadow copies, definitely not source control. Files named script.v2.back.pso.on.final.draft, definitely not source control. Putting comments at the top of your script saying, oh, this date I changed this thing, that's also not source control. Like, what did you actually change? Otherwise, your comments just become huge trying to describe, I changed this variable on this line to this thing, remove, you know, like, we've got tools that do that for us. Don't bother writing that yourself. And it's not just for developers. And I use developers in quotes there because that's developers the job title rather than developers as in the thing you do as part of your job. So we're all sysadmins, DBAs, network guys, whatever. If you write code and press save, you're a developer. Or at least development is part of your job. It's probably a better way. And it doesn't have to be Git. It's what the cool kids are using. But use TFVC, Mercurial, SVN, whatever. That's TFVC. Just use whatever as long as it's an actual source control product, because it will save your life. Or at least, you know, your job. So that's basically my slides done. Like to be efficient with these things. The other talk I do about best practices is mostly slides, and it's lots of me talking and preaching and stuff. Let's close that. Don't need that anymore. So let's make this an actual readable format. That's bright, and I can feel that's bright behind me. Yeah. That readable all the way at the back? Excellent. So, aliases. We all love those, right? You know, we can do our GCIs and stuff, and we can do that all in the console. But if I see a script like that, it's going to take me a couple of seconds to figure out what it actually means, and that's a couple of seconds I could have spent reading the rest of the script. And that's quite a simple example. Anyone know what that does? Yep. What does the last bit do? It's a for each.
For each. For anything that has a name of any.
For each, and it's only returning the property for name of the objects. One of the lesser used parts of for each is you can just say, give me those types of properties, and it does it.
Could you make that more concise?
Yes, probably. And there's a couple of guys on Slack who are really cool at doing code golf, which is amazing, but that's mostly a let's just see if we can do it rather than a let's run this in production. Yeah. One of them's got a weird obsession with APL these days, but yeah. So, much better. Now it's readable by everybody who comes to look at this language. Like, if I'm a new guy coming at this, I'm like, I can probably get an idea. GPS, if I've done stuff with Linux before. PS is to do with processors. Maybe it's something to do with that. What this garbage with question marks and for eaches mean. Maybe I'm asking questions and doing, I don't know, trying to do some sort of maths on it. Whereas full command names, nice and easy. I now know what these do. So readability is instantly much, much better. And I didn't have to type very much for this because I've got tab completion. Why would I type more characters than I need to? And even like VS Code will fix this stuff for me because of script analyzer. Let me just do, fix it. Great. And you can do that as part of. There's some automated way to do it as well. So you don't even have to write good code the first time. Just let script analyzer fix it for you as you go. So let's talk about positional parameters. We all know roughly what this does. Everyone's seen a copy item command. It just, you tell it some data and it puts the stuff in places. But again, not everyone knows these things. Not everyone's coming from a shell-based background. People are coming at this and going, I'm guessing get your items do some stuff. I can kind of guess what these things do. But these are nice, easy examples. You've got those commands where you're just like chucking some parameters at it, hoping for the best. And people are like, I don't know what this data is based on like variables you're passing in or just text you're throwing at it. Whereas if we do it the more sensible way with the full names, takes up more screen space, but no. Screen space isn't particularly expensive last time I checked,
Every column counts.
In the script, I don't care, Again, we do the same thing as we did before, which I'll discuss some more. I can make it as tall or wide as I need to. And as we'll come on to one of these other pages, we'll discuss better ways to do this as well. Objects. We all love working with objects. So I should point out, some of these examples are actual production code people have sent me. Because I asked on Slack and Discord and a bunch of like, send me your really bad PowerShell stuff. Some of this stuff is actual production code people are actually running and writing. And So a colleague wrote this. This is the good old way of like PowerShell 1 creating an object as top example. Give me a string, then select object, a bunch of parameters I want in it. Or you can do the PowerShell 2 version, the new object stuff. Okay, it's a bit more readable, mostly because I've put extra lines in, I haven't put semicolons, but you're still putting it with empty strings. Not great, but readable-ish. This one's a fun one. So someone's taking the parameters I've passed into the command and then just looping over them and add-membering them onto my object. So people who care about performance, add member, not particularly quick. New object, not particularly quick. You probably don't care if you only got 5 or 10 parameters, but if you're doing add member with lots of parameters or lots of stuff, it gets very slow very quickly. So what do we do instead? Everyone knows the good things. PS custom object type accelerator in v3 upwards. Really good. Makes our life easier. Give it a hash table. Give it an ordered hash table. Does make a difference. Big benefit with this, because it's a hash table, we can define it previously, add stuff to it, take stuff away, I need passive credentials in. If someone has passed me credentials, do an if check, add it in, if they haven't provided, don't care, move on. If you're one of the poor souls who are stuck on version 2, again, you can do that sort of example, or you can do that method, which almost certainly isn't going to work. I don't know why I wrote that one. Oh well. It's the way to learn these things. Write bad presentations. But yeah, the idea is, you want to make it readable, reusable, supportable on multiple platforms, and it's performant enough. Add member is probably not going to be too slow, and you do need to use it for like script properties and stuff. But if you add node properties, just don't. Scopes. How many people have done stuff with the global scope? Yeah, it's great, isn't it? And then you run it in something not the ISE, and oh crap, what the hell's this supposed to be? Where's that coming from? Yeah, avoid global as much as possible. But instead we have what I'm calling the good global. It's script. So in your modules, if you set stuff as script variables, script scoped variables, that's valid for the entire module, which is super useful if you have things that you need to pass around a lot, but don't want to pass it as parameters because you don't want your users to have to worry about that stuff. If you've got config files you're importing, import it as a script scope one, make use of it. It's pretty cool. And it's sort of global, but not really, because then users can't screw around with it. You have some wonderful things. If a user decides to change var outside of your script, suddenly your functions and stuff break. Magic function variables. These ones are good. Because of the way scoping works in PowerShell, things can see the variables in its scope and the parent scope. So, in this situation, let's see if this works. So if I do get something, hey, it knows who I am. Great. Or at least it knows who Dave is. But if someone changes that, it doesn't do what I expect it to do. I'm just, it's just running some code that could be anything. If I change that to an array or anything else, this all goes horribly wrong. So of course, instead, we do parameter stuff. Because parameters give us a ton of awesome options. The least one is, I can pass stuff in as I call it, which is a lot more useful. But obviously, everyone's using parameters and not using crazy magic variables, right? No one's ever done that in production. Multiple times. So yeah, much, much better. So if for whatever reason my name isn't Dave, to John is my usual suspect, it works. And I can use this for everything, not just like randomly setting variables and hoping for the best. I've got my ISE set up perfectly, my profile script loads all of this stuff, sets some variables, and then functions just figure it out. Yeah, it's not maintainable, not usable on any other system than this exact one with this exact profile script, running in this exact way. It's not useful for anyone that way, other than, I guess, the person who's doing it, which probably isn't necessarily good for their future. Naming things. Yeah. So naming things is one of the most difficult problems in IT, along with off-by-one errors. So the first one, what the hell is V? What's I? I is usually, fair enough, I, if you come from a programming background, is often to do with iterating over stuff. You've got for loops and things. We don't really touch for loops, but you're doing some sort of iteration over something. V, it's a variable of some sort probably, because it's a V, not an X, but all lowercase names, that's really readable. And then the one that when you're coming from like VB6 or other languages where you type as part of your variable name, so that's a string. String name is probably a string. Great. What happens if I put a hash table in there? What happens if I put an actual object in there? That name doesn't really mean a lot to me. So instead, we use camel case or Pascal case. In theory, we're following the .NET method of naming things. So public variables and things should be Pascal case. Internal things should be camel case. Most people ignore that and just stick with Pascal case or mix and match. Some things, like having camel case parameters, which, so yeah, just to remind people, camel case is that one, where it's like the first letter is lowercase, other words are uppercase. Just much more readable for the human eye, which is what you want. If you want to have some fun, there is a wonderful extension for VS Code that will generate you variable names completely randomly, which is super fun because there's a nice selection of word things from it. And it'll also do whatever sort of casing you want. So if you want, camel case or snake case or whatever they call it, train case, they've got a bunch of names for this. But yeah, it'll do all that sort of stuff. Really useful if you want random words as your variable names, which is probably going against what I'm suggesting here. But if you can't think of names and it doesn't matter, one-off scripts, that sort of stuff, and it'll do the casing thing, which is the really useful bit. Because again, it's about the readability and maintainability going forward. If anyone's got any questions, just shout things at me.
Hey, question. So just to clarify, you're saying Pascal case is for like all variables you create as part of the function or script, or maybe I have that reversed.
So
Camel is capital in the beginning.
Camel is the lowercase in the beginning.
Lowercase, right?
And if you follow the full .NET suggestions, it should be internal variables to your function should be camel case. So it's clear, one's public, one's private.
So you can kind of see, okay, it starts with lowercase, that's not a
Yes.
parameter up top.
Yeah. That's the idea. Most people don't bother with it because they forget, and it's much. You've got like that muscle memory of uppercasing the words and stuff.
Well, if you're doing a for each loop, it kind of prevents you from accidentally using the same parameter name in the for each loop that you have as a parameter. Sorry.
No,
The same variable name? 'Cause
not really, because PowerShell's case insensitive. But yeah, I get your point. Yes, yeah, it can help because you're like it's clear, right? It's not. Yeah. So pipelines, everyone's favorite thing in PowerShell, or one of the many things in PowerShell. Let's talk about everyone's worst thing in PowerShell, backticks. So this blog post by Mark Krause, super good. Tons of awesome suggestions on getting rid of the backtick. So let's have a look at some examples of backticks. We've all seen this one, where you have a bunch of parameters you're passing into it. Microsoft Docs, by the way, full of this stuff. I just haven't got the time to fix them all. And as awful as it sounds, it's actually kind of readable because you can see what it's doing, except, you can't always see that backtick. Like on my screen, it's barely there. So yeah, it's readable in the sense that you can see what it's doing, but it's also not readable because if I put a space in any of these, it breaks. Now that command will never run.
The other fun thing too is if somebody posts a blog post and somebody copies it, it doesn't always copy into your script the way you expect.
Yes, yeah. The one that I really love when people do it is this one. So yes, everyone knows you don't need the backtick at the end of the line there because we can just put the pipe. Well, going forward in PowerShell 7, you can probably have pipes at the start of the line, which is an awesome PR that's been put in. But yeah, just put the pipe at the other end and it works, as I'll show in a second. If statements where you've got lots of conditions, this one, yeah, it only has a couple of conditions, but these could be accessing properties from all sorts of things. People love to do really long lines like this, and do backticks to somehow split it up. There's just no real need to do that because, we've got splatting, which is super amazing. Again, you can you've got a hash table. You can add and take stuff away from it if you need to. We can put our pipes at the end of our lines, and it's a line continuation character. Soon we'll be able to do it at the start of the line if you're on PowerShell 7. So I'd suggest sticking to this format even then because backwards compatibility, guys. Some of us are still sad people who are stuck on PowerShell 2. I feel very sorry for those folks. And then, yeah, if you're doing if statements, you can use logical operators as your line breaks. So you can do ands and ors and other stuff to make your code more readable on a smaller screen. So I can just skim down it. And yeah, again, here I'm only accessing a couple of properties, but if I've got multiple conditions in here, as long as you get your indentation mostly right, so it looks readable, it's much better than having a giant long line or backticks everywhere that, again, you press space and that line's useless. outputting things into the pipeline. How many of us have done that sort of thing? Get me a crap ton of data and then format table it and put it into the pipeline. How many of us have then went, you know what, I need that in Excel, so I better like pipe that into export CSV. You don't quite get what you want then. Yeah, it's not really useful. So if I do want to get data, obviously not sure why I use that example. I don't have AD on this machine. Yeah, yeah. But so you'll get lovely formatted data, which looks beautiful in the console. You pipe that to export CSV or basically anything but out file, and you get wonderful format data in the console in your file, not formatted data. And you get the objects, which are format objects, not normal, useful PowerShell objects, or at least useful in different ways. So instead, we do our format. It's always formatting outside, exporting outside of your function, unless your function's doing exporting as part of its job. Also, filter star, property star, and get AD user. Not pretty. Yeah. Oh, only select the properties you need, or only select one user and all of their properties. Keep things as small as possible because that's a lot of data that gets pushed back. If you don't believe me, talk to Ashley McGlone. He loves format star, property star. Exactly. Yes. Friends don't let friends filter star, property star. It's for me probably not a huge deal. I've only got like a couple of hundred users in AD. Those people with a few thousand, your DCs get a little sad, and your AD admins come hunting for you, and they're generally not nice people. So collections. So we do lots of stuff with data and lots of data. Again, we're talking to AD. We don't want just one user at a time. Or we do, but like pipelines. We want to like collect all that data in and do stuff with it. When we're building arrays, everyone loves plus equals, right? Super fun. And this is where we get to the point of performant enough. So plus equals, yeah, it's awful if I've got 10,000 objects, 100,000 objects. I've got 100 objects, who cares? Well, assuming they're relatively small objects. So let's do an example. Let's do this properly. 100 pipe 2 plus equals 22 milliseconds. Yeah, whatever. If we do that with a few more objects, and these are just integers, so they're like not particularly large objects that we're working with. We're like pulling data from AD, adding a bunch of properties, doing extra stuff. It can take a little bit longer. And if we're doing that with like 10,000 objects, that took 9 seconds. And they're small objects. Yeah, if we're doing stuff with like, huge user objects, then it just gets worse and worse. And you've got to remember to clear the array every time, otherwise you're just going to get a bigger and bigger array, because that's, arrays are immutable. We can't change those things. We just copy them and add stuff on. So instead, you can do stuff like this. You can say the array is the output from this for each loop. And all you do is just put your stuff into the pipeline and it just picks it up. PowerShell handles it magically behind the scenes as like an array list and then turns it into a normal array for you. This is considerably quicker because, well, for each is pretty quick. You're not doing anything with like plus equalsing, not resizing arrays. It's just automatically handled for you.
Is there any difference between doing that and creating an array list that you have to?
Yes, you have to actually create the array list, which has a performance impact. Also, array lists are deprecated, and Microsoft suggests not using them. So instead, the solution is use a generic list, where you tell it what type of object you're putting in, and do that. Yes?
Why is the previous one faster than the one that you're seeing?
Why is
it faster?
Which one? This one.
Sorry, why is this one faster than the previous for you?
So the way an array works is once you've created it, it's fixed size. If I want to add things to it, I have to copy the array and add the object on. So the next time I do it, I copy the array, add the thing on, which is fine if you've got, 100 objects, nothing. But once you start scaling up, you're copying a lot and adding an extra one on, and again, and again, and again. And that's not just performant in terms of time it takes, it's memory use. You know, when you start doing that with big objects, hundreds of thousands of times, garbage collector will figure it out eventually, but you're still having a significant impact on things. Yes?
We're not doing a dynamic array in this case.
They're not exactly easy to do in PowerShell. You know, PowerShell doesn't have the concept really of dynamic arrays. They have array lists, which is kind of what they are, or the generic list. But you can't just go like, give me an array of this number of things. Well, you can, but it's extra work. Most people end up doing, you know, this sort of approach because it's more readable. And if you're not a programmer, you don't know that arrays aren't dynamic. You just think, all of the examples online seem to do this, so let's do it. And you're sitting there like, well, it's been an hour, my AD still hasn't pulled all the users down. What's going on here? I've only got like 10,000 users. And you're like, that's because probably because you're for each, like get AD usering you for each rather than once, but yeah. The other option again, generic lists. There's a bunch of other collection types that do really cool things, but these are pretty quick, and you can do .add. Similar process to array lists, but you don't have to like do null equals to get rid of the crappy output that you get out of array lists. And again, these are actually supported rather than the deprecated array list is. One thing to be aware of, you can't use that constructor in anything before PowerShell 5, but how many of us aren't running PowerShell 5 everywhere? Yeah, everyone's got PowerShell 5. Yes, yeah. I know there are too many people, unfortunately, stuck on PowerShell 2, 3, 4. At least if you're on 3 and 4, you've got a reasonable selection of features. Using arrays. So this is an example. These are examples that someone actually runs in production. So this is probably from someone coming from a non-PowerShell background, but like a general, programming background kind of makes sense. Yeah, iterate over all of the arrays minus the count of array -1, and then do some awful things with if things aren't. Yeah, I had to obfuscate the actual command being running, but the rest of it is basically as they have running in production. Yeah. You've got to have very helpful error messages. So when something broke, you know something broke. So yeah, guys, I don't know what makes someone write code like this, but don't. But you also have things like for loops, which are kind of cool. Let's see if I remember how to do a for loop. Type less than 10. This isn't going to work because I'm writing this as if it was any other language other than PowerShell. Should have dollars in front of those, but like for loops have their place. If I need to only run exact number of times, but we've got for each. We might as well use that because it's probably easier and better and more dynamic and more PowerShell-y. So yeah, we have for each item. Well, for each. Really good, really fast. Reasonably speaking, does the same job. If I have 20,000 items in an array, it'll do it 20,000 times. I don't need to worry about how many are actually there, it just figures it out. I don't have to write okay, I need to run that many times -1. Or, if you're in PowerShell 4+, we have .for each, which is, again, on any collection, does the for each stuff. You give it a script block and it does the thing. Interesting to note, I don't think they fixed it yet. Well, if they have, it's not in version 4, it's in version 6 point whatever. You can also do that and drop the brackets. I quite like them because it makes it obvious that you're calling a method, but this is faster without the brackets. Same with .where. Bruce was very confused when he found that out. It shouldn't be faster, they should be exactly the same, but they're not. Yeah. So. That is also really bad. Yes, the important thing to remember as well is throw actually cares about error action preference. So if you say error action preference silent continue, your throws aren't going to throw. because reasons. So instead, let's just do this because we should use paste-commandlet dot. If you need to throw a terminating error, use paste-commandlet dot throw terminating error. Give it an exception, and it'll actually throw regardless of error action and stuff. Pretty useful. There are people who building exceptions and error messages is a bit of a pain, so you can just go, throw it, and in the catch use this, and it'll build you the object for you, so you don't need to worry about it. Which I've seen a few people do, where you do like try, throw, useful error, preferably with correct spelling, catch. And then you just go, I'm going to throw this error. I want to give it some specific text or a useful message, and then in my catch block, I'm going to actually throw it as a useful thing. You could do the error action preference around that to make sure you don't ruin whatever the user set, but you still get the effect you want. Yeah, that's yet another diversion. Good at these bits. WMI. We all love WMI. We're all using it for bits and pieces. Really useful. Some stuff you can only ever do through WMI. But, most people are doing, or lots of people do get WMI object. Great. Works great. Except, we've got get sim instance now since PowerShell 3, I think, yeah. And it's more performant. You've got a broader range of stuff to talk to. They work basically the same way. Because it's PowerShell, I can basically just change this bit and it works because PowerShell's smart and goes, oh, I automatically figure out what parameter you're talking about. So yeah, if you're on PowerShell 3+, swap to get sim instance. It's pretty cool. And you can use sim sessions and stuff so you can do authenticated sessions to remote machines. Finding software. We all have to do this at some point, don't we? Like, crap, what the hell's actually installed on this box? And this is the way the internet tells you to do it. Yeah. So, anyone know what the problem with this is? It takes forever. And the reason it takes forever is it tells every single MSI on your box, hey guys, what's up? What's going on? And those MSIs go, maybe I need to run a consistency check to make sure I'm okay. Or maybe I need to repair myself, and oh crap, you've just broken just like some random installs on your machine. The performance thing, I don't really care about. I'm not running this too often. It take a while if I've got lots of stuff, but if I'm just going to randomly break software on my machine, or remote machines, or servers that I can't get to, probably want to avoid that. Instead, we've got the registry. It's got all of that stuff in there. Also usefully, it's got uninstall strings, so you can just uninstall the crap you don't want. You also have to check syswow 64 as well for both 32-bit and 64-bit, but this is considerably faster. And the best way to do this is in the middle of a demo, try and brick your machine. So yeah, I don't think I have a huge amount of stuff installed on this machine. I definitely won't have it soon. But it's at this point, if I was running this in a script, or running it once a month, yeah, whatever, don't care. Running it multiple times a day, 17 seconds is.
Again, now would it be a little bit faster?
It might be. It might do some caching for me, but then again, I'm talking to WMI, so maybe it won't. Maybe it'll just, oh, wow, great. How many times do you want to do that in a row? Just to go, I can get this faster if I run it again. You're like, well, you've just wasted 23 seconds running it twice for the same data twice.
You can also use a Git package from package management and pull that as well.
If you've installed stuff through package management.
Right.
Yeah, if you've installed stuff just randomly, or things that don't really register that way. There you go, 500 milliseconds for pretty much the same data. I get uninstall strings if I want to just pipe this to start process, uninstall this crap for me, and then really brick my machine. Yeah, there's a huge performance difference, as you can see, and it's safe. I'm not going to randomly ruin bits of software on my machine, which is, as I find quite useful not to break my machine. Then again, I just ran that in the middle of a demo. So, don't always live with good choices. Any questions about WMI-based fun times? Functions. How many people aren't writing functions? Excellent. Because if there was any hands going up, there would be conversations to be had. Mostly about why not? What have you got against functions? What have they ever done to you? So we've all got parameters. You know, we saw earlier on, don't use magic variables, use parameters. Some people like read host, you know? It does a job. If you have those users who really, really don't want to learn the command line, I guess you could use read host. You probably want to have like a wrapper script that you then call your real functions under the hood, but it's there, you know? It does a job. Obviously, parameters much better, makes things nicer. Chuck a mandatory on there and they'll get prompted anyway. And I might be demoing this in a bit, but if you're doing mandatory and not supporting PowerShell 2, don't put equals true on there. It's not needed. It's mostly a readability thing, so if I say mandatory, I know it's actually mandatory. I don't have to like continue reading for say equals $true or equals $false. I just know it's mandatory. We're good. Parameter sets. These are super fun. Really useful things. I want to be able to do lots of different things based on user input. You know, I've got this lovely function here. It takes a couple of different types of input. I can give it, you know, a name and then some other stuff, and it'll figure out what I need to do. But the problem is, if I just give it a name, what's going to happen? It does, you know, if I tell it to do something, it'll tell me output. Except it doesn't, because, you know, I haven't told it exactly what the hell I want to do with this. So parameter sets are super useful, but you kind of need to use the parameter set default name, or default parameter set name, and then command the binding, which also you should be using in all of your functions. But yeah, now I know, actually, just tell it a name, it'll go, I know what I need to do, here's the thing you want me to do. Because again, how many of our users read documentation in our help files? Wow, yeah, you probably want to tell them to do that. They'll ignore you, but at least you feel a little bit better telling them. So now I don't need to read the docs, I just press name, yeah, do the thing. I know I need to give you a little bit of information, you'll figure the rest out. This should probably be mandatory if I have to require it. Yeah, didn't want to quite fill things up with too much stuff. What if and confirm? How many people have done that? It might be a Boolean sometimes as well, rather than a switch. It's always a Boolean. If you're doing this, it's almost always a Boolean, yes. Yeah. Define your own what if and confirm. Yeah, cool. You know, you can do this. It'll work, I guess. You know, yeah. And yeah, obviously got to have your read host in there as well to make sure the user definitely, you know, wants to do this thing. But you know, we've got PowerShell. Why do we want to write and handle our own what ifs and confirms and stuff? There are probably use cases for it. I haven't found any yet. You know, if you want to do something very specific, but we have support should process. We can set the confirm impact to say, you know, if your local confirm impact is medium, you will always prompt for these things. And then that's all we do. You know, 2 lines of code and what if and confirm are done. I can do all of the good things I need to do with those. As a benefit, because PowerShell is super useful in these ways, if I do set data, I get what if and confirm, great, but because I'm using command binding, I get all of these other really useful things that I can make use of. You know, all of these extra parameters. Tons of useful things for like 1 line of code, or 2 lines if I want the what if and things. So command binding, great. Support should process, brilliant, even better. I'm not going to break production as much this way. You know, when you do your whole get AD user, pipe to disable AD user, and you go run, and you go, oh, I forgot the filter. can I stop this before it hits my account? Can I stop this before it hits the domain admin account or like the Kerberos account and I break everything? Yeah, those, no one's ever done that before. To build on the what if thing, yes, wonderful switches or booleans, as people, because people really love those things. You know, you can, yeah, I can tell it true or false. It works. That's how you do these things, right, guys? Booleans. And there are actual cases where you want to have dash enable and then have someone set true or false. You know, the example I always see is creating new firewall rules. New net firewall rule, dash enable, true or false. Because you might go, I want to create the firewall rule, but I don't want to enable it. And you know, you don't have to remember that switch and have the default behavior be stopped. But again, those use cases are there, but we have a switch for a reason. Like the Boolean thing usually is like .NET guys or like Java guys, people who are used to only having Booleans and who haven't looked at much other PowerShell. And so you can do switches. I don't need to tell it stuff. It does confuse people a little. Look, I've got this. When you're like, okay, and you see examples like false. Like, well, it's just, why would I want that when I could just have a space there instead and it'll do the same thing? Like, yes, but it's important to have that difference. But that's probably the most common way I see people, at least the most common time I see people using this method of writing a switch is to say, just don't bother prompting me. I know my confirm impact's high, but just don't bother warning me. Just delete all those users. I don't need them. That CEO, he didn't need it. He didn't need an account. Probably better for someone who don't have accounts. Output types. Here's a really useful function. We're getting a bunch of data, pulling all of them from AD, and making sure that the users that are linked to computers are there. And then we're going to get, you know, go into all of those computers and get, you know, the computer information, the operating system information. Great. And I'm going to throw our list of users back to the end user. Anyone know the problem with that?
You're outputting what the computer users property.
Yeah. The computing property thing is mostly for, sure, I'm assuming someone's been lovely and decided to extend AD schema or something and add that if they don't have it. But yes, the problem is invoke command is just going to throw your stuff back into the pipeline, which is useful, except I'm also dumping users into the pipeline. So now I've got like 2 different types of data in the pipeline, different objects, at least hopefully different objects. I don't think, last I checked, an AD user isn't like a SIM instance, but you know, AD does weird things. So yeah, we want to avoid dumping crap to the pipeline, you know? But the number of times you see people doing write output, here's some helpful messages, I'm doing this thing. Oh, and by the way, here's your objects. I'm like, and now I have strings and useful stuff in the pipeline. That's a reason lots of people go with write host, because it doesn't dump to the pipeline. And if you're on before PowerShell 5, you probably should avoid write host. If you're on PowerShell 5 and up, keep using write host. It's great. You know, it's not writing to the host. It's not only writing to the host now. It's writing to the host and the information stream, which is good. But you're not getting that data pollution. There are some instances where you want to write output useful strings. Some CI/CD tools will read the output stream and dump that to the screen. I've got a colleague who's written a bunch of scripts that do that sort of stuff because we want that logging information. And like, write verbose doesn't show up by default. So you have to like pass a bunch of switches in to say, please give me my verbose output. Write host usually shows up, but sometimes it's a bit flaky. So write output always shows up. I'm like, I guess so. Yeah, do it, but it feels awful. So instead, we should be capturing the output from our commands, building useful objects. If I want users in the computer data, great, do that. This object's not going to be particularly useful because users is going to be an array and then computers is going to be an array of things that aren't really linked up properly with the users. But you get the idea of capture your output, turn it into useful human usable data, or at least useful data. Whether it's human usable or not depends on who's actually using the data. I would run that, but I don't have an AD. Parameter types. We all like passing paths into commands. Hey, I'm exporting some files. I'm importing some files. Great. Pass it a path as a string. Works. You kind of have to fudge around with that string, make sure it's a real string. Has it got the right paths and stuff in? Or instead, we can say, I'll take a file info object. And now, if I pass it a string, it's going to go, it looks pretty much like a path. Now it's a path. And you can do all of the cool path things on it. But you can also pipe stuff like get child item into this. And it'll go, right object types, off we go. And you don't have to handle doing pipeline value from pipeline by property name. You probably should, but you don't have to as much. There's less requirement. And credentials. Who was in Joel Bennett's session yesterday? So this is probably going to be a little bit of preachy to you, and you'll have heard this before, but yeah. How many of us have had to do this, where we say, give us a username and password. If you're lucky, password's a secure string, or is like read host as secure string sort of thing. Again, there are probably times to do this, like if you're doing stuff with, nope, actually there's not, no. I was like, you could probably do it with APIs, but again, just do the sensible thing and ask for a credential, even if you don't use part of it. So if you work with APIs, a lot of the time it's like, the username is garbage. I don't care about that. I just want the token that you're passing as a password. So still, prompt for credentials. Give it a helpful message if you want to give it a helpful message. But if it's a credential, it's secure. You can do stuff with it to get the password out if you need to, but it's secure is the most important thing. Apparently, I'm overrunning by a little bit. Oh well. But judging by the slowly opening doors. Last thing, Gooeys. We all love Gooeys, right? That's why we're here. Unfortunately, we also all have colleagues, probably, who like Gooeys. I used to work with a guy who couldn't do the shell. Just couldn't get it to work. But I had written a bunch of awesome scripts to automate his life and make everything easier. So, yeah. This code's all up on GitHub. Let's see if this works. No, it doesn't, because, yeah. This is opening somewhere. There we go. So I've got this lovely GUI. It's not particularly, it's sort of readable. It'll look under a folder for any scripts I have there. Kind of cool, it generates this automatically. I've probably got an example in here somewhere. That one, nope. That's the one. Yeah, builds a lovely dynamic view. Great, makes my guy's life a lot easier. But it's also really not maintainable the way I've written this. It's like all of this functionality is all within the same file. Here's some number of lines of code. Don't do that stuff at the top unless you're on old PowerShell. You've got add type now, guys. You should use that. But yeah, I've got all of my code in here. Like this is something, the more advanced and, well, advanced is probably the wrong word. More mature programming languages I've learned is that you have front-end stuff, back-end stuff. Keep them separate. They can talk, but you can swap them in and out. This is just all in one big file. Like, I should say, like the stuff Mike did the other day with WPF bot and how you shouldn't write UIs yourself. I did. It was a mistake. Yeah. Handwrite all of this, yeah. But the idea is you should separate front-end from back-end code. Make it more modular and reusable. I don't have the example, but I end up refactoring this entire thing to just say, yeah, get the list of stuff, but then just run show command because Microsoft figured out all that problem stuff for me, so I didn't have to. So yeah, that's examples. Anyone got any questions? I should probably swap back to my slides. One of these buttons. Excellent, I pressed the wrong button. So any questions? I'm on slides and deck are on GitHub. I'm on Twitter. If you're not on Slack or Discord, please join us on Slack or Discord. We have a variety of links to connect to Slack and Discord. So the question is way more performant than do until. If you're doing way in the pipeline, probably not, because you have a basic overhead of the pipeline. The .way method probably will be faster. Yeah. And I can see Michael slowly creeping into my line of sight. So, yeah. Got any questions? Catch me outside.